In an earlier demo we showed how to manually load bracketed photos and select individual files and do it by hand. Here we're going to show how to batch process lots of raw.nef files all at once. So we click on merge to HDR file. For the minute we will not click on to tone map. The source, I go to select an individual folder. Remember in my earlier demos I put all the files, the NEFs, into my 3 sets folder. And make sure that you tell the system that you're selecting 3 images at a time. That's why I like to put ones into different folders. I'm going to tell it to align the source images, my matching features. Again, this is a standard. I don't normally crop aligned output because you can always do that in Photoshop Elements later. And where is it going to put the finished HDR files? I'm going to, on the right hand side, select the destination, and I'm going to choose it. And remember, I put stuff into a particular folder called HDR Originals. So that's where I'm going to place the output when I run these in batch mode. Again, a couple of points here, just near the top. I do not elect to tone map during the batch processing. If you do, and click it on, it will open up the settings, and you can certainly change various settings. But then when you run the process with that checked on, it will not turn them into HDR, it'll turn them into JPEG files directly. And you know, a universal kind of default may not suit every shot. So I like to leave that unchecked. And my settings for merging, my defaults for the batch would be to reduce noise. These are your normal defaults. Remove ghosting effects, normal. And again, like in previous demos, when you're using this Photomatix software, if you float over the various prompts, it'll tell you what the option will do. I normally do not remove ghosts in the batching mode because we'll show you how to get rid of ghosting effects later by blending other images into it. So we've got everything. Merge to HDR, don't tone map, and we'll click on run. So what it does at this stage, it's going to that folder in the bottom left hand corner, the my 3 sets, and it's picking the first 3 images starting with 8567.nef. It's applying the noise reduction according to the merge settings that I established. And we'll just wait for a moment or two while it moves on. I'm not going to leave this demo record everything because this could take 10 or 15 minutes. So once you've run it and started, you can go off and have several large cups of coffee and come back when it's finished. So on that first one, it's aligning them, and then it's merging them into the individual HDR file. And when it has finished the first 3, it will show a progress bar just above that stop button near the top right hand corner. We'll see that coming onto the screen in a moment now. And then it'll move on to the next set of 3 in that source folder. There's lots of various different options one can take in here, and again the PDF manual for Photomatix Pro 4.1, which you can download over the web, will explain the various options in more detail. So I'm going to stop it now and we'll come back in a few minutes. But just before I stop it, I will let it advance beyond the first 3. And we should be about there now. So let's just stick with it. There we go. And it's gone on to the next set of 3, and there's the progress bar on the top. It'll show you roughly how long you've got to wait. So I will stop the recording at this stage and come back to it shortly. So several minutes later I come back and I find that the various groups of 3, and the thing I'm looking for is that the batch has successfully completed. It tells me where to put it into the HDR originals folder, and you can look up and down this for any errors. The progress bar is gone. So we'll close this up now in a moment, and we'll go and have a look at the actual files in the file system. So another thing to watch out for here is to, as I said earlier, is to make sure that when you point to the source folder, it is groups of 3 or groups of 5 or groups of 7, and you're pointed at the appropriate correct folder. I like to put my originals, my original raw files, into an appropriately named folder, because if you point at, say, a folder of 5 sets and declare above that it's 3 images at a time, you're going to start getting messages along the right hand side. By the way, naming conventions, you can choose how you want to name the HDR files. I don't bother. So let's just close this up now and we'll have a look at the files in the file system at this stage. I'm back in my file system, my HDR originals folder. You can see all the individual HDR files, and they're quite large, as I said before, upwards of 40 megabytes each. And that second one, I allowed the batch process to work on the original 3 that I had done manually. I just renamed that file earlier. You can see a difference in size, 37.8 megabytes for the one I did manually, and 38 megabytes for the one I put through the batch mode. There's probably a good reason for that is that the noise reduction when you do it manually offers as a default to do it on the normal and the underexposed shot, but the batch mode just does it on underexposed shots by default, unless you change those settings. So in our next presentation chapter, we'll have a look at tone mapping one of those HDR files.